Welcome to Redemption from Addiction podcast. This is episode number 17. I got a special guest with me tonight, Dave Crooks. So I came to know Dave a couple of months back. So we started coming to Hope Church here in Simpsonville, which is actually where we're recording tonight. This is my first time recording remotely, believe it or not. We started coming here back in early September, and I think Dave was called up on stage to promote Evans Training Center. I'm gonna let him talk about what they do there, but it is a recovery center where they work with people and help them in recovery and treatment. And we want to promote that tonight. But yeah, so he came up and shared on stage some things that they were doing, building up a really nice campus there and promoting it. And of course, flags went off for me. I'm like, I made a beeline after service and made sure I spoke to him and let him know who I was and that I had interest in what he was doing, and just wanted to, have a chance to talk with him. And a couple of months passed by, and the Lord laid it on my heart to reach out to you. I guess it was sometime in December.
Yeah.
And we got through the holidays and everything, and now we're here. Today is February 3rd, 2022. So, Dave, thanks for coming and joining and sharing your story tonight. So I'm gonna turn it over to you, man. Let's just get started. Start with your stages of your life. This is your story, man.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
I appreciate you inviting me on to the show tonight. I think you got an outline there and you sent it to me. And when you had spoke to me maybe last month and we kind of went through how this would go, I shared my story with you. And at the very end, you had asked me to, when we did this, to share a little bit about the childhood story and kind of back up even before that. And I realized, at that point that I didn't share anything about childhood. Well, it wasn't intentionally. It was, I think it's a product of where I'm at Evans Training Center. There's such a tendency to blame, my addiction. A lot of guys have a tendency to blame their addiction on childhood things. And I did that for sure. And so I'm almost like, what's the word, conditioned to not talk about that. And really it's kind of an attempt to avoid putting responsibility on something else other than me.
It's funny you say that, because I have that same tendency. And I'm very careful, about going there, because with me, I lost my mom when I was really young, 7 years old. Whether that had something to do with my addiction or not, I don't know, but it was a part of my story. It was obviously a traumatic experience that I for sure I can tell you that it has had a huge effect on my ability to show affection. Being raised by a strong dad who did a great job, and a great stepmother who came in several years later. It still sticks with you. It creates character, whether good or bad. It was something that happened. But I'm very careful to also say, as a fine print, this is not my excuse for what I did. I still have to take responsibility for that, but I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just say that to preface, I am going to share some of my childhood, because the fact of the matter is there was some really hard things.
Yeah.
And, but if my mom or my dad listen to this podcast or watch this on YouTube, I don't want it to feel like this is a bash session to them.
Sure.
But I am going to be vulnerable and honest, because it did have an impact on me. And I got to be honest about that. Although I totally used it to my advantage for many, many years.
In your addiction.
In my addiction. Yeah, it was definitely all their fault. If they wouldn't have, then I would have. And I'm, luckily I don't think that way anymore, but
at the same time, to your parents, they know, we know now as we're adults that we are flawed human beings.
Yeah.
And I make mistakes as a parent. I made a mistake today, I'm sure, so it's part of it.
Yeah. And we're both parents of young kids.
As we
were just talking before this, and oh man, I'm making mistakes. As a parent, all my judgments are coming right back at me. That's for sure. Um, backing up, the last thing you said when we talked a month ago, or you said it in passing, you said, the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I'd heard that before. I couldn't remember where, and I found the TED talk where the guy shared, I can't remember his name. And then I was meditating on that and thinking about my family. When I was very young, I don't remember if I was 4 or 5, but my parents did get divorced. And so my earliest memory of my parents was, the memory is this, it's sad, but it is what it is. There was a blowout, drag out fight at my uncle's house. And there was screaming and yelling. And my mom was in a car in the driveway, potentially running over my dad or my uncle. Everyone was freaking out and they were searching for me. And I was hiding under a desk in a hiding spot, just trying to not get found, scared to death.
Yeah.
That's the first memory I have of my parents together in the same room. I don't have any memory of them with affection. That's what I have. And then it really didn't get much better than that growing up. Unfortunately, me and my younger sister, we were in the middle of a sloppy, angry, messy divorce. And we started our childhood that way, and it was sloppy and it was ugly and it was messy. And there was lots of animosity on both sides. My dad, more even keeled dude. So he would keep his, he washed his mouth. He was careful. He watched his manners for the most part. My mom, not so much. She definitely said what she thought and felt. And it was tough, growing up. We lived for years in kind of this in-between custody battle thing going on, and different relationships with mom and dad, some shuffling back and forth, kind of the whole, there were weekends when dad was supposed to get us and didn't, and that hurt. So there was a lot of instability growing up as a kid.
So, thinking back on that, what was your mindset as you were observing, these things when dad didn't come, when you thought he was going to, or there was this disruption? Was it just normalized to you at some point and then become numb to it? Or did you really, internalize that and feel as if you were part of the problem, or maybe a little bit of both? What did you?
I don't think I could. Looking back as an adult now, it's hard sometimes to know what I was feeling as a kid. As a kid, I didn't know what to think. If a weekend got canceled, I didn't really know how to interpret that. My mom would say things like, well, he doesn't want you, and man, that's hard to hear, as a kid, and he's not there to defend himself. So, but it makes you wonder.
Yeah.
So there were even times where dad would get us for a weekend, and then he would come and drop us off at mom's, and he'd walk us up to the house. I can remember this one time, and he's saying goodbye to everybody, and I'm like, I'm going outside to play, and I go back and I sneak back into his car and hide in the trunk area, and just so I could possibly get back to him for a little while. And I had this fantasy in my mind. I was living with my mom initially, and I had a fantasy that if I lived with dad, everything would be better. And I just sort of believed that hurt my mom's feelings, and I had an attitude towards her, and she reacted to that. Eventually custody did get switched to my dad. And that was a big, sloppy, court-filled mess. And unfortunately, what I found when we got there is that life was just as much of a mess there as it was with mom. A little bit more stable, but pretty disappointing in the end, to be honest. They loved us. They did what they knew to do for us. But my environment growing up was extremely tumultuous, scary,
unpredictable,
a little unpredictable. There was a lot more stability with dad finally, just in the sense that he had a business. He could take care. He was taking care of all of our physical needs. But he was also remarried, and stepmom and my sister were in constant competition for dad's attention. And I kind of just backed off, and I was kind of the one in the background trying not to make any waves or piss anybody off.
Yeah.
And then eventually I learned how to like just operate in the shadows a little bit because they're pretty distracted with all their chaos. And
So you just detached and basically, you know, zoned it out, so to speak. So take me through that. That was your home experience. What was the school experience? Friends, you know, what was your popularity level? What groups were you associated with? You know, what kind of hangout? And by the way, you grew up in Florida too, right?
Right. Yeah. South Florida. Yeah. The first thing that came to mind when you're asking that question, I'm thinking of Nirvana.
Oh, me too.
Spirit. Yeah.
No, I'm total grunge era, dude.
Yeah.
Pearl Jam. Yeah. Alice in Chains. So yeah, I'm still there.
Yeah. So my grandpa was a drummer.
Hey,
my dad.
Don't tell me about. I like Creed too.
Yeah. Everyone, all the males, they're all drummers. So I'm gonna be a drummer. So I've got my drum set and I'm playing Nirvana songs and as loud as I can. And that was the crowd I was hanging out with in middle school for the most part. Custody got switched to middle school. So I left, I was in one part of Florida and went to a different part of Florida. High school began, and all my friends in high school were the band. I was the band nerd, but if you're a drummer in the band, then you're not so much of a nerd. You're still semi-cool as a drummer. Mm-hmm. And those were my friends. They were in the bands, and I was not popular, but I was popular in my own little, band circle, whatever band that groupie was. Yeah.
So you probably have seen this like meme or this illustration, the lead singer and the guitarist, they get all the attention, and the girls and the drummer, I think, is second to them. Right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
What kind of influence was that? I mean, of course I can recall, Nirvana, Kurt Cobain, that whole era was a very veiled but obvious, drug.
Yeah. Actually, I remember the day that Kurt Cobain committed suicide. I was still living with my mom, and my dad called me that day because he had heard on the radio that had happened, and he knew that I was into Nirvana, and he was genuinely concerned for my well-being. He didn't know how attached I was, and he was afraid, and so he reached out and he showed concern. He called me the day Kurt Cobain killed himself just to make sure I was okay. I thought that was really neat of him. I wasn't personally affected by Kurt Cobain. I felt like, wow, that's pretty crazy, but I wasn't going to go kill myself because of it. I wasn't that attached to it, but it was cool that my dad reached out. So I say that to say, I don't know how much that music influenced my decision to end up doing drugs. I don't think very much.
I don't think for me either. I just, when I hear Red Hot Chili Peppers, when I hear songs from that era, it brings back, I'd say, good memories for me, because for me, my high school years were great. I mean, my high school years were, I went to a Christian school in protest in the beginning, but it turned out to be a really good experience.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of good memories absent from any drugs or alcohol. But,
right. Yeah.
This sounds like it's the same for you. So as things progress, you're in high school, and I know we've talked a little bit. Where did things start drifting off for you?
Yeah. Well, my peer group in high school was the band, but then it was also some older kids and some people who had graduated high school, and particularly a girl. And I remember it was I think my 16th birthday party, and my dad had a lake house, and he let me invite a bunch of my friends for a long weekend for my birthday. And that weekend, I had a first experience with a girl who was older than me, and she liked to smoke pot. Mm-hmm. And I found that I liked to drink. I had already started kind of sneaking alcohol here and there with some friends, just fun stuff. Nothing bad had happened. So I was already drinking. At 15, I started drinking and playing with that. At 16, I was drinking pretty much on the weekends here and there, hiding it. And then this girl, I remember it was New Year's Eve, I smoked pot for the first time. I think I'm 16 years old. And all her friends are a little bit older. And now I'm kind of just progressing to typical weekend high school partying, drinking on the weekends with my friends. But pretty quickly, and even going back to like that weekend at the lake house, my dad let some of us, he let me drink, even though I was 16, he was okay with it being under his roof or whatever. And, but even he saw me and was saying things even right in the very beginning, like, oh, slow down, David, slow down, David. And even my dad recognized, maybe I shouldn't have let this happen. And then pretty quickly, my friends were that way for me too. Like I was the guy who was very quickly taking things a little bit further than everybody else was. Pretty quickly, I acquired a fake ID, and now I'm going out to restaurants and bars, and I'm 16, 17, but I've got a 21-year-old ID, and I'm buying alcohol and I'm sneaking it. A lot of my other friends aren't doing that, but I am. And
they would get you to do it on their behalf.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah.
But there was signs very early on that I was just a little bit different than my friends. I was taking things a little bit further than everybody else.
Did alcoholism run in your family that you know of?
It did. There's a lot of people, particularly on my mom's side, who struggle with chemicals and emotional issues, depression, mental illness in general. And when my mom and dad got divorced, my mom really struggled personally dealing with her emotions revolving around that. And for many years, she struggled with chemical abuse. And so that, it's been kind of in the family.
Did you have any exposure to church life, faith, at any level?
No, not really. There were little blips of time, little moments where you'd go to a church service
for Easter or Christmas.
Yeah, or a holiday. Or I remember one summer, like my dad sent me and my sister to some Christian camp with some church, but we didn't really know the kids or fit in. And it ended up being like really weird and nothing really happened. But no, that was not a normal part or a regular part of our lives. Faith was not something that was a part of our lives. I knew that I had a great grandmother who was a devoted Christian. And I knew that she sincerely prayed for us. Other than that, I really didn't have any Christian influence on me. No.
Okay. So now this is happening in about 16, 17, at the end of your high school years.
Yeah.
And you were starting to see tendencies within yourself. Other people were starting to recognize certain behaviors that were, a little bit concerning, right?
Yeah.
Where does that take you? I assume you graduated high school. So take me through that.
I graduate high school. I'm 17. I graduated early, and now I'm free. And there's a few things I've said I'm never going to do, like smoking weed and alcohol is fine, but I'm never going to do cocaine. That's what drug addicts do until I have the opportunity. And I do cocaine for the first time, and I'm 17. And wow, like this is magic. Once I tried cocaine the first time, like I knew that I loved cocaine. And I worked to get money to drink and do cocaine. And I started living that way for a while. At the same time, I was just sort of lost. I'm 17 years old, and there's a family business, a printing business. And I was kind of raised that that's what I was going to do. I was going to take over the business. It was my great grandfather, then my grandfather, then my father, and then me. I really didn't have a choice. There wasn't any other plan. But I didn't want to. Like it wasn't what I wanted to do, but there was no other plan. So just on a whim, one weekend, I went to a recruiter's office and just signed up for the Army. And my dad was pissed. He's like, "What are you doing?" Everyone was like, "What?" Even my friends. And I was just searching for something that for some fulfillment.
Yeah.
I had been drinking, doing drugs. I was bored. I didn't want to do family business. So I just joined the Army Reserves, and I figured, there's no plan for me for college or anything. So I'm going to go to the Army, get college money, and I'll come back and I'll build my life the way I want to, I guess. And so I did that, joined the Army Reserves, and it was the dumbest thing ever. Like I picked the job description that was the shortest amount of time and the highest bonus money, so I could, get in and out as fast as I could. So I was the laundry and shower specialist in the Army Reserve. That was my job. And
as a reservist, do you used to have to go through basic training and all that?
Yeah. So I went to basic training, and I figured also I'll pick this really silly job so that if I ever go to war, I'll never go to war, laundry and shower specialist. That's what I was thinking. So I went through basic training. I loved it. I had so much fun in basic training. So it was just a challenge, and there was the camaraderie of all the guys. And I really had a blast in basic training. It was one of the most fun things I ever did. And then I came home you go through basic training, then you go to advanced training for your special job. I did that. And then I came home. And as soon as I came home, within like a few days, 9/11 happens. Boom. And I'm at home. And then within a week after that, I get a phone call, and they say, guess what? Your unit just got activated. You're going to war. Ooh. And I went, oh my gosh. Yeah. That was not the plan. This is for college money. I didn't really want to go to war. And I didn't know, I didn't share any of this with you on our first conversation.
No.
Yeah. It's just coming out now. So I'm going to war. So here's my attitude is I got nothing to lose. I'm going to die, party. I didn't put together that laundry and shower specialist. Well, when you go to war, you have to have clean clothes and showers. And so you're going, your support. But my attitude was, live it up while you can, because I don't know what's going to happen. So I started partying hard. And I got in a lot of trouble in the Army, in the Army Reserves. I kept getting arrested. We were in a preparation camp in Fort Stewart, Georgia, getting ready to go overseas. And I would just miss formations. I would go out and get drunk. And then I started getting arrested in the Army for underage drinking. They started following me, and they'd catch me, and then they'd arrest me. And I remember these two officers, they got me out of a bar again, and they didn't know what to do with me. And so they decided they were going to teach me a lesson by running me till I vomited. That was their plan. But I'm 20 years old, and I'm in the best shape of my life after basic training. And these guys are in their 40s. And so what ended up happening is we just ran. And I just told them my sob story, and I blamed my parents for everything. And they were just disgusted with me. And then, so they went to work when that was all done. Their plan didn't work, but they looked for how they could get me out of the Army. And they started those Article 15, I think is what it called, proceedings to kick me out of the Army. And by a stroke of, for me, what felt like amazing luck, they deactivated our company and they sent us all home. And, but when I got home, I was in it. I was wide open, and I couldn't stop. So by the time I turned 21, I'm drinking every time I can.
Cocaine too.
And cocaine too. Yeah.
In South Florida, easy access.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I'm lost, and I don't want to work for my dad. The Army thing, I don't care about that. I'm just sort of depressed, and I'm hooked, and I need money, and I need drugs, and I'm partying, and I'm miserable, but I can't stop.
Were you doing this with buddies, or, was this, or did it matter? You were going to do it with or without somebody at this point?
Yeah, that's Not anymore. So, it was with buddies, but at this point now I just have to drink to be okay. I just have to. So it's not even social anymore. I have girlfriends and I'm drinking with them, but I don't, I'm off. I'm way off. And then I experienced my first overdose. And that is, I don't remember if it was a New Year's or a 4th of July or something, but I'm in an apartment and I've got a bunch of strangers at my house and they pull out something. I don't even know what it is. And they're cooking it on my stove. And I do a big line of it. And then I wake up the next day in a bathtub, naked. Everybody's gone. My girlfriend at the time is there crying. And basically, I don't know what happened to me, but they apparently thought I was dead and they all took off and left me there. And luckily I wasn't dead. I'm like, whoa.
What were they cooking in the crack or?
I think it was ketamine, like a special K. I didn't know what it was, but, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I just dodged a bullet here. I need to do something. And I remember calling my dad for the first time and calling him and telling him for the first time, Dad, I got a problem. Like, I think I'm a drug addict, maybe, but I need help. And so I'm not yet 21. I'm still 20 when this is going on. And so he jumps in to try to help, and he finds a psychologist, Christian. It wasn't a Christian psychologist, a psychologist. And we try kind of all the easy ways first, so you're going to go see this lady once a week. You're coming back to work for me. You're going to follow my rules and my schedule and see this psychologist lady. And that really wasn't helpful or profitable. I kind of I don't know what, for some reason, within a couple of meetings, she was telling me, oh, it's totally cool for you to drink a beer or two at a football game. So I'm saying things like, I can't imagine never being able to drink again. Like, that's not reasonable, right? I should be able to have a beer or two. And she's like, yeah, you should, it's reasonable for you to be able to have a beer or two. I think maybe she thought that I was just going through teenage stuff. And I don't think she saw me as an addict, and probably because I was deceitful, I'd imagine. I don't even remember what I said to her, but that was a waste of time for sure.
Well, I think back on, this is close to 20 years ago. We didn't know what we know now about addicts and certain behaviors and certain things, patterns. And it was, in my opinion, and maybe I've been in recovery so long that I'm naive to this, but, a lot of this stuff was just normalized, in circles that I was a part of, that it was normal to, Friday, Saturday, just get drunk and snort cocaine and party and, return to work on Monday. That's recreational, and even maybe a couple of nights a week. And I think there was this mindset with people, where, they made it okay that everybody does it, but they didn't fully understand that these things just get a hold of you.
Yeah. It had a hold of me, but as scared to death as I was waking up in that bathtub, that fear lasted probably about a week. And then I was better again. I got this, I'm good. And then a few weeks go by, and now I wake up in a totaled vehicle, and I was driving and I just fell asleep at the wheel. I had been doing a bunch of different stuff and mixing a bunch of drugs together and fell asleep at the wheel, woke up totaled. Police at my dad's house looking for me because I just ran away. I woke up and I'm like, I'm crashed. I got to get out of here, and just took off, left the car there. And somehow I got out of that. My dad had a relationship. Somebody who works for him dated the chief of police. They brushed it under the rug. Once again, I got away with it. No real consequence. That scared me to death for about a week. And then I got this, I can do this on my own. I'll slow down. And I kind of went through that cycle for a while. But then it started to get dark, like emotionally inside. I started to get pretty dark, and I started finding myself thinking about suicide a lot. And I would just catch myself. I'd be driving down the road and I'd be thinking, what's the best way for me to drive this truck into that pole on the bridge at just the right angle so that if I do it, I definitely die. Yeah. And it's got to work because I don't want to be a paraplegic or anything. I need to die. So I'm calculating how I could do a good suicide. And then what am I thinking right now? And I'd see my brother and I see his face. I'm like, oh, what would that do to him? And I see my sister and my dad and mom. I would see them and I knew I had resentment in my heart towards them because I would see them and I would think, I hope it hurts. But my little sister and my little brother, I didn't want to hurt them. So I was getting real dark.
Yeah. It's like you were trying to imagine the emotional damage that you would put on them by being dead. And feeling justified in that.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, so I know because I've been there, but
yeah. So clearly I had issues with mom and dad that were unresolved inside of me. Because when I thought about what it would do to them, I hoped that it hurt. Yeah, so I wanted to hurt them back, essentially. A guy who worked with my dad, he was doing some business with my dad, and he was a Christian guy. His name was Jeff Whalen. And I don't know if my dad confided in him a little bit or if Jeff just sort of picked up on it, because I would work in an office next to my dad. And I felt like Jeff would look at me and he would just look through me. Like he could look at me and he just knew I wasn't right, and probably my dad shared some things with him. And so Jeff was the first Christian that I can remember who just noticed me and decided, I'm going to go after this kid a little bit, try to get into his life. And he did. And he just started to kind of pursue me a little bit. He called me and invite me to go to church with him. And I'm like, this is interesting, dude. And I'm kind of hungry for some relationship, and I'm open-minded because I'm kind of scared. And Jeff says, hey, I want you to come with me this weekend to my house up in Okeechobee. I've got this little vacation spot, a little ranch. And I want to introduce you to some of my friends. And so we go to his place and he takes me out to this church that's kind of in the middle of nowhere. And it's a drug and alcohol rehab community, I guess is the best way to say it. It's this big compound in the middle of Okeechobee, Florida, on 250 acres. And what it is, it's a drug and alcohol program for men, a Christian discipleship program, residential program for men. And it happens to be a graduation weekend. And what that means is you got all the guys who are finishing the program and they go up on stage and they give a testimony of what God had done in their life since they'd been there and what they were going to do next, et cetera. And so we sat through that, and it was really inspiring. And I was listening to these guys one after another talk about what God had done in their life and where they had come from in their addiction, and then how they had come to God, and then what he had done. And
kind of what you're doing tonight.
Yeah. Yeah. In a shorter version.
Yeah.
And then their parents would share a little bit about their experience watching their son go through a transformative process. And it was really interesting.
Yeah.
This whole time as I'm there though, with Jeff, I'm such in denial that I don't even realize that the whole reason I'm there is because he's intentionally brought me there so I could hear that stuff. Yeah. So I actually am bold enough to say, like, when we leave that night, I said something like, wow, Jeff, thank you so much for bringing me there. It's so cool that there's a place like that out there for guys like that who need that kind of help.
Yeah.
I mean, praise God that places like that are out there for guys like that. And even in that moment, after car wrecks and overdose and nothing to show for my life.
Did he even respond to that?
No, he just smiled, listen. Yeah. That's where I was still at in my mind. So it took more to get me to a place where I realized what I really need. So I went home and still tried to kind of white knuckle it. But the depression was growing and I wasn't getting any better. And then finally I got to a place where I was just so low, and I had messed up all my relationships. My friends didn't want to be around me anymore. My family didn't want to be around me anymore. And I'm trying to pretend like I'm this cool guy who's got it together. But in reality, I'm an almost 21-year-old drug addict living in a bedroom in my daddy's house. And
why didn't people want to be around you? Were you like a powder keg? Were you angry? I mean, how?
I was just unpredictable and kind of a jerk. I'm starting to get kind of mean and rude and cynical, and I'm just not a fun person to be around anymore. I used to be fun. Now I'm just kind of a jerk that they don't know what I'm going to do. And my dad's still letting me work for him, but I've been doing cocaine all day, and then I'm pounding alcohol all night to try to fall asleep because I got to get up in 3 hours to go to work. And I'm in this bedroom, and there's muted pornography on the TV in the background. And I'm just looking at my life in this moment going, how did I get here? And it broke me. And at this point, I'd heard the gospel several times. I've gone to church with Jeff several times. And I had rolled around the idea that maybe Jesus is real. I don't know. Like, it's a little far-fetched for me. But in that moment, just something in me broke. The reality of my life hit me. Like, I'm not even old enough to buy alcohol yet, and I'm already this far gone.
Yeah.
And
because you're probably thinking, if I'm like this at 21, what is 25
I'm screwed.
like?
Yeah, like I got nowhere to go.
Yeah,
I am screwed. I can't go any lower. So other than jail or prison or whatever. And something about that realization that hit me, and nobody saw that. It was just me in my bedroom, and I dropped to my knees in my bedroom. I'm praying to God. There's porn on in the background. This is the condition. I'm high. And I just say, Jesus, I had heard it. Whoever calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. And the name of the Lord is Jesus. And so I'm like, I guess I got to say Jesus. So I just out to the air, I said, Jesus, if you're real, either help me or just let me die. And I was just, tears coming down my cheeks, and it was the most sincere I could be at the moment. And then I knew, like, he'll forgive you for your sins. So I'm like, please forgive me for my sins. I've screwed up. I've ruined everything. And I just poured my heart out to him the best that I knew how to do. And, it was the most, now that I've read scripture after the fact, like I think of the sinner's prayer, or the Pharisee and the tax collector. They both went up to the temple to pray. One prayed like this, one prayed like this. And I was the one who I couldn't even look up. I was just so ashamed. And I had nothing to offer God, just that little mustard seed of faith to just force myself to say his name.
Wow.
And there was no lightning bolt or anything like that, but it was just me humbling myself before God. And I don't remember how long it took for me to fall asleep after that, but I did it. And the next day, I just knew in my heart exactly what I needed to do. I needed to go to that place where those guys were at. And honestly, my dad wasn't really ready for that. Even though I had been wrecking cars and ruining my life, I don't think he was ready for me to take such an extreme step. This was a 10-month long residential program for like serious drug addicts. And I don't think my dad wanted to believe that that's where I was at, but I knew I was.
He couldn't reconcile in his mind that his son had reached to that point that he needed that.
Yeah, he no. And he experimented and did stuff when he was young, but he was just able to stop. And I always envied those people, but I wasn't one. I couldn't do it. And it was just like, Dave's an extremist. Here's another extreme thing that you're going to do. Because I'd done tons of them, change directions a million times, kind of my MO, unable to stand still. So now you're going to go to this 10-month, this is kind of a stretch, but nothing could have talked me out of it. I knew what I needed to do. I needed to go to that place that those guys were talking about, that thing that happened to them. And so
you started envying their stories.
yeah, I remembered that. I remembered them. I remember what they were saying. I just knew like I knew I needed more than just get sober, because I would get sober, but I was miserable sober. So I get high again. I just knew there was more to life, and I needed to go find out what that was. So I ended up at that place at Dunklin. It's called Dunklin Memorial Church. It still exists. It's thriving. As a matter of fact, we're taking our entire program and staff there for a leadership conference in March, so they can all kind of see where we come from. So I went to Dunklin, and I just turned 21, and I'm checking into a long-term rehab for men. And here, the beginning of my story with the Lord is happening in this weird place in the middle of nowhere.
Wow. So you did the whole 10-month run there, right?
Yeah.
So if I remember, you said that in that program, they did pallet making, you're making pallets, and
yeah,
then you liked it so much, you decided to stay and be a part of what they were doing. So,
right.
So take me through, you had a span of a pretty decent long sobriety.
Yeah.
Right. So briefly take me through that, and then the years ahead for you.
Yeah. So, I went through that program, Dunklin, and then many programs that are out there that are Christian-based residential programs have similar models, in that a lot of their staff and young leaders are guys who had gone through the program themselves. And so that was available for me to stick around and kind of go through that. But as I got to the end of my program, I wasn't ready for that. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to take my sobriety now and go conquer the world. And so I knew in my heart I was supposed to stick around, and I didn't. I left right after I graduated, and I fell right on my face.
Immediately.
Within 2 months, I was drinking and using cocaine.
Wow.
And that was so heartbreaking and humbling, because I had just spent 10 months at this place and relapsed within 2. And everyone is like, what? Yeah. Wow. How could this be?
Yeah. So I remember you telling me that. I thought that as at some point you did become a part of that program as a employee.
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
so you relapsed 2 months after.
Yep.
On the same substances that got you in there to begin with.
Yeah. And it wasn't
what was your mindset like? I can handle it. Like, I've done 10 months or.
No, it was, to be honest with you, there's a note in our notes here that says, make sure you talk about how romance and recovery don't mix.
Okay.
And, the beginning of some of my downfall in the story was with a girl, and the middle of the downfall of my story is with a girl. They told us in that program, you're not allowed to write females because romance and recovery doesn't mix. But I had really screwed this girl over in my addiction, who was my last girlfriend before going there. And, my heart's getting soft, and God is showing me how to take responsibility for my actions and how I've hurt people. And I'm thinking, I don't care what they say. I owe this girl an apology. And so hopefully somebody listening to this who's going to go to a long-term program will not make this mistake. And so I ignore them, and I write her an apology, because I'm a good Christian now, and I ought to apologize to this girl for what I did. And so she got my apology letter. And of course, to her, she's like, oh my gosh, this is the Dave I always wanted and needed, and now I'm in rehab, but I got a pen pal, and it's kind of secretly. And now I start talking about her as my fiance, who I start changing the verbiage to everybody and kind of manipulating the perception of this relationship to all those around me until I get some buy-in. This is Dave's fiance. They were going to get married. She's a good Christian girl. She's on the up and up. Well, she wasn't on the up and up. She was a mess, just like I was a mess. But now we're going to get married. And so I've created I've rekindled this relationship that was unhealthy to begin with. And I can't tell you how often that happens in recovery with guys that are just looking for something to feel good. All the drugs are gone. There's nothing to medicate your feelings with, but man, a girl paying me attention, that feels real good.
And it's familiar.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've got everybody convinced that's the right thing to do. I'm going to go out there and me and her are going to get married and everything's going to be good again.
That didn't happen.
No, I got out there and pretty quickly we crossed boundaries that we shouldn't have crossed. And I knew in my heart, this is going to be a disaster. And we had a wedding date set again. And her parents are putting deposits down on places and we're moving towards the moment. And I'm like, and I know, oh no, this is a mistake. And I called off the wedding again. I did it before I went to rehab, called off the wedding again for the second time and hurt her twice as bad as I did the first time for sure. And in the midst of like the depression of all of that, the regret, I just said, screw it and drank. And then once I'm drinking, I'm doing drugs. And I didn't even call Dunklin to tell them I was coming back. I just packed my stuff and went. I just knew this is where I need to be. I'm an idiot. I need to just go all in and trust what these guys are saying and listen for real. And so I ended up kind of going through a fast tracked version of the program again, real fast tracked, but with a lot more humility. My ears way more open. And now I'm really listening and really doing what they say I should do. Yeah. I don't know, some of that young pride just pushed me in the wrong direction.
So how old were you at this point in time?
I'm back at Dunklin. I'm 22 years old.
Okay.
And now I'm enrolled in their leadership training deal. And I stayed there the first time for a total of 3 years.
Okay.
So there was that little blip where I left and fell on my face and came back. You put all that together and I'm there for 3 years. Okay. After that 3-year period of time, I guess I was there for 3 years, sober for 2 years. But I had these questions inside of me like, okay, I had settled inside. I can't use drugs. I can't drink. Those are givens no matter what. And I didn't want to anymore. And I'm a few years down the road and I'm got some stability and I've met my wife. Lacey and we met while I was at Dunklin at some vacation Bible school. And she was one of the female leaders for the youth girls. And I was running a soundboard and we noticed each other. And I remember looking at her and thinking, wow, like, look at that girl leading those other young girls. Like, what a charismatic, beautiful, awesome girl. Like, she would be a great mother. That's what I thought when I saw her. And then my next thought was like, what did you just think? Yeah. I had never looked at a girl like that. Yeah. That would be a great mother. What? And I remember praying about it the next day. Like, that was a really weird thought, Lord. Like, what's up with that? And he showed me like, your values are changing. And it was like an encouraging thing for me that I would look at a girl for the right reasons. Now, I also found her beautiful, but the main thing that attracted me to her was just her spirit and her love for the girls and her, the way she was able to be in relationship with them all. That's what attracted me to her. And we got married out there. Man, we started life there at Dunklin. And pretty quickly, there was a prayer meeting out there with the staff. And kind of the subject of the prayer meeting was, hey, we're overstaffed. So if you feel like it's a good time for you to move on and transition out, it's probably a good time. And so Lacey and I just sort of jumped on that. And I wanted to know now, like, hey, I'm sober for real and I want to be, and I'm not going to compromise this, but is God real outside of this place? Or is it just this place that's keeping me sober? Can I stay sober outside of this place? What's it like to go get a real job and not rely on the family business to take care of me? All those things, like I wanted to experience what an adult man should have to experience. Right. And so we came up here to Greenville, South Carolina. We just had some friends who lived up here and there was no other good reason to. It might as well have just been a dart on a map. We were newly married. We had some money from the wedding and a new start. So we came up here and We moved into an apartment on Haywood Road. And I walked to the nearest shopping plaza and just went into every place and asked for a job. And finally, Tony at Tony's New York style pizza, which is now closed. He said, you know how to make pizzas? I'm like, nope, but I'll learn. He's like, well, tell me your story. I'm like, well, I've just been in drug rehab for a few years. He's like, oh, appreciate your honesty. When do you want to start? I'm like,
just my type.
When do you want to start? I'm like, tomorrow. He's like, oh, come on in. Tomorrow.
They make the best pizza makers, huh?
Yeah. And so my first real job out of rehab was working at Tony's New York style pizza. And I had Tony from New York on one side of me making pizzas, and Paulie from New Jersey on the other side of me, making pizzas and food. And, every other word is the F word, and they're wild. And Paulie's a recovering addict, heavy into AA. And we're having great conversations all day.
You're Italian?
Huh?
You're Italian?
I don't know what I am. Tony's Italian.
Yeah.
Paulie's, Paulie is, I don't know what Paulie's nationality was, but they were loud and wild, but good guys.
Talk all the time.
They're just nonstop
fight all the
talking.
time.
Yeah. It was crazy.
Yeah.
So I'm making pizzas for minimum wage, but I'm having fun.
Yeah.
And Lacey's leasing apartments at the apartment complex we're living at. And I'm getting my questions answered. Like, I'm sober. I don't want to drink. I don't want to use drugs. And I'm not. And I couldn't make pizzas forever and afford to take care of our family. So as time went on, I got a little bit of a better job and a little bit of a better job. And finally, I got a job that was good enough where Lacey didn't have to work, and we got pregnant with our first child, and life is moving in the right direction. And we were trying out different churches, something we didn't really know how to do, kind of went through all the different denominations around town and ended up landing in a really conservative denomination where they just really taught the Bible line by line. And that's where we got our Bible teaching, for the first time, really. And otherwise I got Bible teaching at Dunklin, but not, line by line, book by book. And
yeah, you got the surface gospel, bare bones.
Yeah.
Jesus salvation story. This is a little bit, this is second, third level stuff.
Right. Yeah. So we're building on the foundation that God has laid, and years go by, and I'm doing it. I'm sober, and I'm walking with the Lord, and things are good. And we have our first child. And then I started to have this nagging feeling inside of me, like, man, I really just wanted to get these questions answered for me. Like, is this real? And now I feel like those questions are answered. This is real. God is real. And you can stay sober and walk with the Lord, and life's a good life. And then I was just thinking of all these guys at Dunklin, like that were in the program now. And the fact of the matter is, there was nothing as fulfilling to me as a person than helping the next guy. I loved being in training at Dunklin and being like a mentor for those guys in the program. And nothing I was doing work-wise was anything close to the fulfillment that was. And I really missed it so much. And so I ended up going back to Dunklin with Lacey and our child. And I got my job back, essentially. And I ended up working there then for 6 years straight on staff. And I loved every minute of it. And I was sober for a 10-year stretch at between here and then going back to Dunklin.
So let's piece together. You ended up coming back here, and I know you had you did an experiment, right? Your wife went out of town. You were anticipating that period of being alone to run this experiment. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So I feel like such a jerk to admit this. So I'm sober for 10 years, and I ended up leaving my job at Dunklin on good terms, but it was just, I kind of felt like I was coming to the end of that season.
I remember you telling me, you were like, you left, you felt like you had hit a plateau, and you wanted to, take on a responsibility or a job that was higher level, and that you had outgrown that, so to speak.
Yes, and that's true on some level. To some degree, at Dunklin, I had become, in my mind anyways, kind of a big fish in a small pond. And I was bored and I was antsy to do something different. And in reality, looking back, I could say it this way. I lost my gratitude. I had become ungrateful. I'd become kind of numb to the miracles that were going on all around me every day. They weren't impacting me anymore, but I was also sort of playing with some sin too. I was being extremely prideful. I was dabbling in porn at the same time, being a leader in the church, and I'd preach on Sunday occasionally, but I was starting to have some secret sin and hiding that. So there was some hardness of heart going on in me, and I was struggling. But I wasn't dealing with that struggle the way I should have. And I certainly wasn't being completely honest with all my peers about it. I was struggling and hiding. And I was looking to go ahead and move on. Part of that is probably just wanting to run away from some of my own struggles, which is sad because I'm also there teaching in the classroom and writing curriculum. And from the outside looking in, you would think I'd really have my stuff together. But inside I was struggling. I was struggling bad and looking to escape. And so I thought, well, maybe I'm struggling because I've been in this environment too long. It's time to move on. I need to do a little bit better for my family. It's time to buy a house. Now I have 4 kids and I'm anxious about how am I going to provide for my kids, working in ministry for ministry salary, and when am I going to buy a house? And
did you have a feeling of like inadequacy? You've got 4 kids now, you're, mid-30s, I'm assuming. And you're like, I should be further along now.
Right.
And there's other people that I know that are my age that are. Did you have that feeling?
Yes.
And I asked that question because I've walked that out too.
The answer is yeah. I did feel, I started comparing myself to friends of mine who are out there, really killing it, doing better than me financially. And like, how am I going to put these 4 kids through college? And so I was worried about a lot of that stuff. And honestly, looking back from a spiritual perspective, there was a lot of pride in that, like as if I'm going to dedicate my life to serving the Lord in ministry, and then he's going to not take care of my kids. That certainly wouldn't have been the case. But that kind of shows you where my mindset was at. I was losing track of who the Lord of my life was supposed to be.
Well, I think now, as I'm listening to your story and to understand the Bible and the level that I understand it now, it's those areas of sin, whether it's secret sin or outward sin, that really can get a stronghold on us, and it allows the enemy to play with areas of our life and place doubts in our mind about God's faithfulness to us and God's provision and what his promises are to those who are serving him. And I'm speaking to myself here just as a testimony to, areas of sin that I've had to deal with, and rightfully so after my addiction. Addiction was really just a surface issue. I had some other issues deep down that I had to deal with.
Yeah, certainly.
And, and it forced me, Dave, to really, really dig into the word. And that drove my thirst to understand the origin of sin, the origin of evil, the origin of what it causes our flesh to do, and understanding that. And I have a huge interest in psychology and the brain and the mind and the flesh, and what captivated me, especially about addiction, even in myself and other people, was how in the heck is something like alcohol or opiates or cocaine or whatever, the list can go on, to what extent would it cause you to leave behind your family, your kids, a good job, and just it's like you're taking, a life of fulfillment that, a good job and all that. And you're walking away from it to, to your addiction. I was like, what? Like, and I could see myself, I'm so blessed, and by the grace of God, it never reached that point. It never, my addiction didn't interfere with my career, to the degree of it costing me, my job, where I got fired from it or anything like that. But it's just like, I would look at other people like, how does something like that get you? And so that drove me to understand the origin of sin and how it correlates with the Bible. And if we, it's really simple when you really get down to it. And I'm trying to overcomplicate it, but it's really simple. If you do what that book says to do, if you do it, you'll have a great life. You won't have an easy life. You're going to have difficulty, but it gives you the instructions on how to overcome it.
Yeah.
It tells you what to expect. But when you have sin in your life, and when you're doing things that you shouldn't do, you're giving into your flesh, you're opening the door for that kind of thing. And that's something I have to keep in front of me every day, because I still face temptation. I still, have my eyes wander in places that they shouldn't, or they haven't, at least it's tempted to. I don't, right. I've gotten good enough where it don't, but I've had to realize that I live inside of flesh that will not spend eternity with me.
Right. Yeah.
And that's why that's the challenge for me. The challenge for us is that, life is really about denying our flesh. Like Paul says, like, our flesh is sinful at its core. And, everything the flesh wants, what your flesh wants, it wants because it don't have to spend eternity with you. And when I heard that, it was like, boom, light went off for me, denying my flesh in the sense of, would I rather go work out or be lazy? I'd rather be lazy. Would I rather, have a salad or, fried chicken? I'd rather have the fried chicken. You know what I mean? Those kind of things. Not that there's sin in one or the other. It's just a life full of making choices of, are we going to give into what our flesh wants? Yeah. And I know I got off on a preaching mode there, but that was really what popped into my mind when like I said, I started understanding, the origin of sin and how we open the door to these things that start to instill doubt in our mind, Yeah. So, you went through, you were dabbling in some areas that you shouldn't have. I know I kind of led you into your wife was going out of town, and you had a lab experiment.
Yeah. So we left Dunklin, and I came, I came to Greenville to go into a new business for financial reasons. And I was struggling. I was not prepared for how difficult that was going to be. I was making headway, and I was doing good, but inside I was a mess. I felt like I had run away from what I was called to do. And so even though I was able to get some traction with the business I was starting, it's like I couldn't get any satisfaction with it. I was an anxious mess. And something in me was saying to me, the Lord was saying to me, you're not supposed to be doing this, and you know it. But I was committed. Like I had bought into this business, and there's people invested in me, and I know inside this was a mistake, and I'm a mess. And one weekend, Lacey was going to go down south with the kids and have a weekend with her family. And I was home alone in Greenville. And I thought, I haven't drank in 10 years yet. And I'm so stressed out. And I'm probably at this stage in my life, I'm sure I'm over this addiction stuff. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm sure I could just go have a beer and relax, and it'll probably be fine. And so after a decade of sobriety, I went to the gas station, bought a beer, came home and drank it. And As soon as that beer was gone, I got back in my car and I went back to the gas station and I got a 6-pack of beers and came home and drank them.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm off to the races. Like, there's right away, I know inside, like, I just woke this thing up. Because the next day I'm thinking about drinking and I'm thinking about drinking. I'm thinking about drinking. And the only thing that's different this time than last time, 10 years back, is now I got 4 kids and a wife, and my wife thought for sure she would never go through this with me.
And she hadn't, right?
No, she only knew was sober days. Yeah. And she assumed that's how it would be. And so did I at first. But there's something about me when it comes to drinking, the old story, one's not enough and, or one's too many and 10's not enough or whatever it is. But, and that was definitely true with me. So I was back in it and it was a mess. It didn't take long before it came out. I don't remember if I confessed it or if she caught me. I don't even remember how it came out, but it came out and she was devastated. And so was everybody else. Nobody could believe that I would do that after this much time. And so, okay, I'm going to stop. And it was just like a repeat of when I'm a kid again. I'm trying to stop, but I can't stop. And I'm hiding it. And I'm pouring vodka and Mountain Dew in big gulp cups and putting on my business suit and tie and glasses and going and having business meetings and then going to parking lots of random places and drinking. Like, what am I doing? Like, how am I back here? And I remember I'm sitting in a parking lot in a fancy sports car, drinking my Mountain Dew and vodka in my suit and tie, thinking, what in the heck am I doing right now? And I get a text from a guy who I had mentored down at Dunklin. He replaced me in one of my functions down there. And it just said something like, Dave, you're really on my heart this morning. We're in a prayer meeting today. I'm praying for you that God helps you right now. And he didn't know what was going on with me, but, and I just broke down right there in the car.
Maybe God's real.
Yeah, maybe he is. So that just broke me. Here's a guy who, he's looking up to me and he's praying for me. He knows in his heart I'm not right. He's praying for me and sends me that text. And I just started weeping in my car. And I called my friends at Dunklin. I let them know what was going on. And they said, you got Ben. Ben is the guy who was one of the founders of Evans Training Center. And he said, he's in Spartanburg. He said, Ben's in your backyard. Go see Ben and talk to him. He's right there next to you. He's one of us, at least you can get your head screwed on straight. And so I went and saw Ben. Lacey brought me to Ben and dropped me off and to talk. And actually she brought me there to drop me off for a couple days, and she was going to go to town, back home to her parents, and I was going to stay with Ben for a couple days and just kind of get my head screwed on straight. And that was over 5 years ago, and I just never left. So basically, I went to Ben's place, and I just knew in my heart that I was home, and that God had fully corrected me. And that he had humbled me, and that I have a specific purpose in my life that works really good when I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And it is to work in drug and alcohol rehab ministry. And that's where I'm at my best. That's where I'm supposed to be. And I had failed to accept that, I guess, in some ways. I kind of felt like a Jonah, like I had a calling and I walked away from it, and it didn't work out well. I also felt like a Peter, who, after all that Jesus did, to show him the truth, denied him. And I was walking through that. Like, if somebody didn't have an excuse, it was definitely me. And I was so ashamed of that. I kind of went through a season of restoration between me and the Lord, where I had to kind of clean up my relationship with God because I sort of turned on him in many ways. After all he had done for me, I had an attitude towards him and I was ungrateful and prideful. And even after all of that, he still was willing to bring me back into the fold and restore me. And he did it really gently. I'll never forget this. It was the weirdest thing. Maybe they wouldn't want anybody to know this, but I'm just going to say it because it's true. But I was at Evans Training Center for a few months, and Ben and his dad said, you know, we've been praying for a long time that God would send somebody here to help us. And we know that that person is you. Like, you're supposed to be here. You're supposed to help us. And they said, and we have this for you. And they gave me my first paycheck. So we're going to hire you to be here. I'm like, I was just drunk, you know, a few months ago. You know, this is crazy. And Lacey, my wife, was pissed. Like, sure. What? You need to punish this guy, you know, after all he's done. And I remember praying. I felt like the Lord said to me, if I want to show grace to you, there's a lot of people that are going to have a problem with that, but that's between them and me. I'll show grace to who I want to show grace to. You're done drinking. You will serve me. And that's my decision. And whoever's got a problem with that is their problem. Follow me. Wow. And that's that was resounding inside of my soul. And it was kind of like, once again, the most humbling thing that happens in my life has been when I know I deserve to get my butt kicked, and God instead, he knows that I know that, and instead he pours out grace on me. And it's like, oh, that hurts worse. He's like, I don't deserve this. He's like, I know, but I'm going to give it to you, but you're going to serve me. And it even goes further than that. Yeah. I don't know how some of the listeners to your podcast, I don't know the demographics, who's a Christian, who's not. In my case, the Lord spoke to me very clearly and told me that he wanted me to make a lifelong commitment to serve him at Evans Training Center. And so I did that. I went to a prayer meeting. I said, I thought this is what the Lord told me to do. And I'm going to make a 25-year commitment to this cause. And I did that, and I meant it. And it's been challenged already for sure, but I'm serious. I'm not running away from the Lord anymore. I'm going to do what he wants me to do by his grace. I'm not going to try to do anything else. I'm just going to serve him and see where this all goes. Yeah. And trust him. I mean, I might get fired or something one day, and then that'll be that, but hopefully not. No. We'll just see what happens. Yeah. So talk about Evans a little bit. I want to, promote that and encourage people to be a part of it. So what does that program look like? Yeah, it's a residential program for men. It's 8 months long. So a typical day in the life at Evans is guys will wake up, they'll have breakfast, and they'll have a journaling, quiet time, prayer time sort of thing. After that, they'll have 2 hours of class, 2 to 2.5 hours of class time, going through everything from basic addiction 101 stuff to Christianity 101 stuff, kind of everything in between. They go through several different workbooks that were developed at Dunklin, the program that I went through. And it starts off with, like I said, the 101 type stuff. And then after some time, it goes into some counseling type stuff, inner healing, things like that. Ends up with a discipleship program, curriculum. And so that's in the morning times. They have class. And then after class, everybody loads up, including our teachers in the classroom, and they go learn a trade on a job site. So for us, for the most part, it's painting and landscaping. So there's paint crews that go out on the road, and there's landscaping crews that go out on the road. And our staff who teaches in the classroom are the same guys who are supervisors on our job sites. So they're there with our program guys. Okay, let's talk about it in theory in class. Now we're going to go do it in the world for real. And they're mentoring them kind of every step of the way. And so that works out really well, because there might be something pretty emotional in the classroom that comes up. But the same guy who was walking through our student in that realm is now with him during the work day. And oftentimes the work day gets shut down just to minister to a guy about something he's dealing with. So it's work during the afternoons. And then when that's done, the guys get home at the end of the day and there's a planned activity most evenings or homework to do and things like that. And that goes on for 8 months long. There's no upfront charge for the program. All we ask is the guy has a good attitude and a willingness to change and do whatever it takes. And so their way of paying for their program is just to go to work with us in the afternoons. They don't get paid for that, but that helps cover some of the costs to operate the program. Once that program is over, just like kind of Dunklin is set up, they have options to stay on longer and go through a training process where they're now the mentors for the next guys coming up. And many guys choose to do that. So
what's your capacity?
Right now, we can only work with about a dozen guys at a time because we're restricted because of our building. But
you're in the process of expanding.
Yeah. We've been fundraising for the last few years, and we have the architectural plans to build a 10,000 square foot facility in Welford, and that will accommodate up to 40 men. So we're hoping to break ground this year on that. And we're still fundraising. We're still a good $500,000 away from where we need to be to finish that project, but that will double and eventually triple our capacity to help guys. Over the last 5 years, a guy who goes through the entire program and finishes, we've had an 88% success rate, which we measure success by ongoing sobriety, stable employment, and stable living environment 1 year out from graduation. So of our graduates of the last 5 years, I mean, the vast majority are doing very well. That's the good news. The more difficult side is only 30% of guys who start the program finish the program. And that's not because we intentionally make it so hard, but it's just because it's hard to change.
Sure.
And so a small percentage actually go the distance.
Yeah. Well, Dave, I'm gonna wrap up the show. I'm gonna ask you one final question. There's somebody listening to this podcast that we'll leave the names out, but there's somebody listening that is between the ages of 20 to 25. They've grown up in a broken home. They've had less than ideal childhood. They've maybe been victims of abuse, maybe sexual abuse, and they're struggling at an early age of adulthood, trying to figure out what's going on. This person has also realized that they have a problem that they're really not willing to admit, at least to anybody else, but they can at least admit it to themselves. And they're scared and they don't know what to do next. Knowing what you know now and having a lot of sobriety underneath you and working with a lot of people who you've seen success, you've also seen some failures, and I think success and failures is part of it. We want to have success all the time, but this person I'm talking about was just like you. Knowing what you know now, what is your simple message of encouragement to them?
You probably can't do it alone, but you definitely can do it with some help. I would stop trying to do it alone. Yeah. Christianity and sobriety are team sports. And if you haven't taken that first step to call out to Jesus and ask for help, look, it might feel dumb, and faith feels like that sometimes. It feels foolish, but the Bible's got a neat promise. It says if you have the faith of just a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, be thrown into the sea, and it'll go. It don't take much. It takes very little. Force yourself to call on the Lord. Force yourself to ask for help, and you'll be surprised about how the help comes. It's totally doable. You can do it. It is not hopeless. Your feelings will lie to you and tell you that it is hopeless. It's a lie. It is not hopeless. God is ready and waiting, and there are a lot of great people who are ready and waiting to help you, and you can do it.
So I'm going to read a Bible passage, and I'm going to, for those who are listening who don't know how to pray, I'm going to read out of Jeremiah chapter 29. And this is a popular chapter in the Bible because in verse 11, it says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." But then it goes on to say, and this is what I really want to point out, "Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart." And as you were telling your story, the Lord was really softening your heart, even in that moment while you were alone. You had pornography playing on in the background. The Lord will find you wherever you are, wherever you are. It doesn't give, his love is not conditional on your circumstances. It's just the only condition is that you seek him, and you seek him with all your heart. So, Dave, thank you for coming on. We're going to close out in prayer, and I'm going to, for those of you who are listening, I'm going to pray for you, but I'm also demonstrate to you how to pray. So, Father, thank you for Dave. Thank you for his story. Father, I just pray over the listeners to Dave's testimony, which is such a powerful story of redemption. Lord, that anybody who's listening, that they would seek you and seek you with all their heart, and that you promise to find them. And Lord, anybody who's listening who is struggling, Lord, I just pray that you would find them in this moment, right where they are, whatever their circumstances, and you would touch them, and you would guide them and direct them in where they need to be, and give them the help and the resources that only really you can provide. Pair them up with people, with programs, with information to get them on the right track and to follow you all the days of their life. And I pray this in Christ's name. Amen. So Dave, thank you for coming on, man. I really enjoyed it. It was a pleasure having you, bud.
Me too. Thank you.
All right, man.